Welcome back to the Jujutsu Kaisen comparison series. Now on season 2, episode 7, an episode that kicks off very strong with some new Sakuga to add to the old cuts from last episode when Mahito was doing his evasive maneuvers, thanks to the legendary Kaito Tomioka. We also get some fresh Sakuga of Mahito's maniacal laughter, not to mention Mega Mekamaru's steamy new reveal. Oh, and the cuts of him charging his laser are still the same, but now we get to see the colorful display of destruction said laser produces, which leads us back into new manga territory, right after we left off last time on page 14 of chapter 80. And if you couldn't tell from the extra vivid composition thus far, not to mention the Dezukai freeze frames, this episode is gonna have quite the bombastic approach to Akutami-san's work, and an anime-only punch after the opening is hardly the start of it. Now, keep in mind, I won't mention every new punch that's thrown, as pages like this make that a futile effort, but I'd rather pay more attention to Mahito's movements anyways, because this sort of deformation is very reminiscent of Toji's forest acrobatics back in episode 3. Likely because they're both keyed by the same animator, by the name of Kosuke Kato. The sort of deformation style he goes with really fits Mahito's playful personality to a T, and I can't help but applaud his whimsical use of line work here. Unlike his cuts of Toji, these crossing lines can be found everywhere in these cuts, and it somehow accentuates Mahito's unpredictability. So much so that in the anime, Kokichi and Mahito somehow end up on the opposite sides of the dam, which means that Mekamaru now has to get his anime-exclusive Kool-Aid moment and head over to join Mahito on his side. Also that he could go wide-range fishing with his next blast dubbed the Miracle Cannon. While they did really nail the charge of this move with that scrappy line work from earlier and the lava-like buildup of energy, I will say it is more difficult to ascertain the blast itself. We'll get to why that is in a second, but regardless, the move didn't do zilch to Mahito anyways, as he's already up in the air ready for a strike of his own. It might seem like Kokichi is just wasting away years by this point, but the end of chapter 80 informs us that Mekamaru has only yet to get with the program. Not that that stopped him from still getting hit when we move into the next chapter, which will convince him to load said program, courtesy of some anime-only curse effects and a new heads-up display of what the technique is that he's about to run. A technique that's delivered to us by the one and only Benjamin Fouar, who also animated that ping pong scene from last episode. Just like back then, there are some slight revisions to the original layout, such as this revised crosshair here, as well as some other mech UI elements, but unlike last time, now we get the full hit of Fouar's enthusiasm before executing a move. And it works perfect for Mekamaru's character, because while the attack itself may seem like a simple flesh wound, it's got a hidden soul-destroying kick to it that Mahito was not expecting. Nor was he expecting that follow-up smack into the forest. Pretty savage in its own right, but I would love to thank Fouar personally for turning that into an anime-only curb stomp. For the first time this guy actually took some damage, it was pretty damn devastating, and Kokichi still plans to hit him while he's down with a barrage of blows afterwards, which was turned into a mega-charged dynamic entry kick in the anime. Neither of these attacks hit anyways, but nonetheless Color Ghetto impressed. The momentum just swung hugely in Kokichi's favor, and he plans to follow it up with his flashiest technique yet. Because with the power of pigeons, Mekamaru will test the use of seizure restrictions to give us one hell of an Itano circus sequence where Mahito has to dodge an array of these lasers. A sequence that is in tune with the events of the manga, but eases into anime-exclusive territory once Mahito enters the forest, which is where animator Kyukawa jumps in with this amazingly dynamic layout. It's by far the most packed cut of this episode, and I would absolutely love to see the doga for it, because I'm sure the finished drawings look fantastic, but, well, in the final release, okay, so I guess it's finally time to address the elephant in the room: ghosting. A term that the Sakuga community has coined for the practice of blending frames together, not to mention the dimming that usually comes along with it. Frankly, I've been mostly dismissive of this topic because its use has been a high point of contention this season, and my opinion of it isn't nearly as harsh as some others. Compared to many other Sakuga enthusiasts, I do believe that there is a place for frame blending, but only under the right circumstances. And given that those circumstances are entirely subjective on my part, I decided to abstain from using that view at all in these videos, except on one occasion back in episode 3. But after this episode, and more specifically this cut, it's becoming harder and harder for me to not say that it can be a definite quality diminisher. I'm sure many of you know this already, but just in case you don't, let me bring you all up to speed. This otherwise incredible sequence of Mahito beasting his way through the forest looks like a smeary mess sometimes because of epilepsy guidelines in Japan. We have Pokemon to thank for that. And on the surface, that does seem to be the only reason, but even as an outsider looking in, I do think there is more to it than that. You might recall that back when I covered Demon Slayer, there was no such ghosting in that show, and that's because they tackled the points of regulation during the production phase. Even for slow-mo shots, they found new ways to approach the scene until eventually they were left with a product that met regulation before distribution. And based on the rumors of production hiccups in this show, MAPPA probably didn't do that. But I think many people might be wondering why Toho and MAPPA doesn't just distribute the Ghost-free product to Western streaming services that don't have those restrictions. They've done things like that before, mainly for censorship reasons, but I think the logical answer to that question would be, why give us special treatment when these quote-unquote fixes can be released in a Blu-ray version months later? Naturally, this is all speculation on my part, and I'm not here to overly criticize or overly focus on the strained working conditions in Japan. That's never the point of these videos, but I think there are some things that need to be said, because most of us know that bad business practice can often come at the cost of an animator's hard work. But that's the most I'll say on it for now, and I likely won't mention this again unless it gets outstandingly egregious in the future. Egregious like this segue back into anime-exclusive territory as Mahito rides along Mechamaru, as opposed to doing a bunch of dodges at dam level. In this way, the anime shows that Mahito is making a little bit of a comeback, since in that version alone, he cuts off Kokichi's power supply while the pigeon beams following him attack Mechamaru instead. It's interesting that they wrote this part in, because with the giant error signs that pop up as the pigeon beams narrowly miss, you would think that this means that Mechamaru couldn't function anymore, but he's still able to punch Mahito into the forest just like the manga has him do. I guess that giant power line he was carrying around with him didn't matter much in the end, but either way, it was bound to get cut off once Mahito used his domain expansion. But even if the anime now grants Kokichi the power to show his friends on screen while accessing the truest power of his GURRAN LAGAN drill, it won't be enough to stop the power of the hands. Hands that do so much more damage to him in the anime, because while the manga just has him freeze in his tracks, middle finger still ready, the anime hands take massive chunks out of him, eventually making him collapse to the ground, where we'll see that fantastic cut redone back from season 1. Just the hypnotic hands part. Mahito, his foe, and the composition around him are totally different. And with that, Mahito brings an end to the duel and the chapter at that, skipping past some Kokichi copium and on to the next chapter where Mahito uses idle transfiguration to bring Mechamaru to the ground like he already is in the anime. Surely he imagines Kokichi is just disfigured inside, but this wasn't the case, as Kokichi looks perfectly human in the cockpit. And this is something that the anime alone shows us, because while the manga would normally have Kokichi give us all of his monologue about how he'll make his comeback after he makes his comeback, now it'll all happen before he stabs Mahito, in between Mahito's lines as he walks away. But not all of Kokichi's lines made it over from the manga, because while he does still say that he has 2 stocks left in reserve, he no longer recaps how he used 2 of the 4 that he had, the second of which making him capable of using the 3rd stock. Brought to you by a simple domain. And no amount of anime-exclusive animals Mahito turns into will stop the insane damage it just did to him. It didn't kill him, but that didn't stop Kokichi from prematurely celebrating his triumph. To him, all he had to do was defeat Geto, who is now standing on top of the dam instead of the mountainside, and then Kokichi could finally see Miwa again. A false foresight that the anime alone shows us during his charge to attack Geto. But unlike the manga, he didn't even get the chance to scream fire before his dreams are shattered by an anime-exclusive drill hand puncturing his chest cavity. A drill hand that does not exist in the manga, which is only start of the proof that episode director, storyboarder, and overall animator for this final sequence, Yoto, is a pretty hardcore GURRAN LAGAN fan. Because just like from the anime to the movie in that series, the final exchange from manga to anime here has been extended considerably, as now Kokichi summons one last-ditch Mechamaru to fend off the cockpit destroyer. Everything from the Gainax-style sparkles to the flowing energy out the back of the mech, and of course the drills that defy all adversity. It all just screams passion from Yoto. Even the speedline background art is reminiscent. It's impossible not to draw parallels to Hiroyuki Amayashi's work from the late 2000s, almost like we're briefly reliving that innovative period that he paved for loud and punchy anime direction. And I didn't even mention how that relates to everything else that we've seen in this episode, such as the wildly colorful and blobby blasts, iconic perspectives and camera management, and impactful stills with extremely bold line work. It makes this a standout episode in this series, and it all comes to a head for the most one-to-one comparison between the two shows that we've ever seen. As a pioneer mech show, this director couldn't have chosen a better inspiration. It works really well for this moment, where your hopes and dreams are laid as bare as the skies allow. But unfortunately for Kokichi, this isn't GURRAN LAGAN, and the reality of the situation is far less hopeful. We may not actually get to see what happened to Kokichi in there, but it's safe to say which side won. which means that the Shibuya plot can proceed as planned as we bleed out of this chapter and onto the next one where it's already taken place. Though in the anime at least, we do now get a sneak peek at what happened around the time the veil was put up, like how some people were able to notice that veil and faceplant into that veil before getting sucked up into an ominous human vortex. After that, we can sync back up with the beginning of chapter 83 as the sorcerers assess the situation. This part is probably the most faithful, and I don't mean just to the manga, but with real life as well, since these are actual places molded after Shibuya. So if you ever go to Tokyo, architecturally and layout-wise, this is pretty damn close to what you would actually get. There are very minor tweaks here and there, likely for legal reasons, but the physical locations of our Jujutsu sorcerers are undisputable, and they likely will be in future episodes. Now, don't think that means I'll be examining every reference street in the future. I hate to admit it, but just finding these took longer than I'd like. But I do have to admit that seeing the real-life counterparts of these shots is insanely cool. It almost makes the whole event feel kinda real, especially when I found out that these 3 locations of the sorcerers form a nice little circle around where the veil was put up near the center of the Shibuya crossing. Now that's attention to detail right there. This is all, of course, on the outside of the barrier. On the inside, things are looking far more chaotic than usual, and some people are a little more in tune with the going-ons here, mainly those who saw that vortex from earlier, which the manga is just now showing us, all heading exactly to the place where Gojo will be going, as soon as he adapts this final panel for the episode. We'll have to see where his little escapade takes us in the next episode, but for now, that'll just about do it for me. This episode is just the start of the craziness to come, and I know parts of this video were a little more critical than I usually am, but if you liked it nonetheless, then make sure to give it a like, share it with a friend, and maybe get subscribed for more content like this. As usual, a giant thank you to all my patrons who wait patiently for my reaction videos. And for everyone watching this, I hope you all have a fantastic day. So until next time, this is Registry, signing off. Take care, everyone.